Hello everybody, I thought I'd run this little problem by you. Vauxhall Insignia 2011 P0171 fuel trim too lean. This is one of those problems you could piss around forever and a goddamn day and get absolutely nowhere. Let me just walk over to the computer quick and I'll just show you the code. There it is, P0171. What that means is there's too much air been detected in the engine cylinders. So the engine ECU is trying to inject more fuel to compensate, but it flings this code up. Now what was happening with this particular car, if I had it standing still, ticking over as it is, within the space of 2 minutes, that code would appear in the ECU. After, I don't know, a 30-40 mile run, the engine management light would then come on. So I had to try and fix it, but as I started looking into it, I soon realised there is a massive amount of things that could cause this code. So, but let me show you, I will show you how I fixed it. I'll just jump inside for a minute. It's all fixed now anyway. But if you look, I've got my Solus Ultra here. I've got the heated oxygen sensors, numbers 1 and number 2. Now number 1 should fluctuate between like 0.2 and 0.8 of a volt, which is basically fluctuating okay. Number 2 lambda sensor, generally speaking, the voltage is kind of more steady. To start off with, I replaced both the engine lambda sensors, and they actually, the aftermarket sensors made things a whole lot worse, so I took them off and put the original ones back on. So forget that idea. But you see below, you've got short-term fuel trim and long-term fuel trim. The readings for them two there are both around about 0. If either of them go into minus figures, that's okay, don't worry about it. But both them zeros, they were both sitting around about 30 and 24 all the time. They wouldn't even go down to 0 or into minus figures. So there was definitely something wrong. So I'll just switch this engine off a minute. I started looking around the engine. I took the MAF sensor off, sprayed some electrical cleaner in it and blew it out just to make sure, just to check that. Like I said, I did put aftermarket lambda sensors on here, but they just didn't work properly, and I've come to the conclusion if you change lambda sensors in one of these Insignias, you really want to get genuine ones, because I don't think the aftermarket ones are any good. They just don't work properly. I got some very fine spray of brake cleaner and sprayed it all over the manifold, because I've heard that these manifolds are prone to leaking, especially where the gasket is, where the manifold bolts onto the head. So I sprayed fine brake cleaner all over that manifold, everywhere, and the engine note didn't change. There's no air leak, so I checked all the vacuum pipes, everything around this manifold, could not fault it. And to be honest with you, the engine was running perfectly fine as well. There was one guy on the internet saying the oil filler cap was off, which obviously that is going to cause a problem, but there was nothing like this on this car. This car was driving fine. I couldn't find anything wrong with it. But then, and to be honest with you, I'd done this by chance. You've got your evap. It's a purge solenoid for your charcoal canister. I think they call it an evap solenoid, evap valve. This wouldn't work. It wasn't working. And I got a screwdriver and I tapped it, and all of a sudden, this is when the engine was running, when I tapped it, it started working, and I thought, that's a bit odd. And if you put your fingers on it, you could hear it pulsing, bob, 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 like that. So I thought, do you know what? There's vacuum air from the manifold goes through this. So I thought, I'm going to replace that just to be on the safe side. So I got a new one from Euro Car Parts. It's about £40. I put it on, and do you know what? Straight away, the the fuel trim, which was reading about 30 and 24, the long-term fuel trim and short-term fuel trim was quite high when it should be sitting around about 0. Let me just get the... Oh, and now my scanner's froze. Hold on a minute. You know, this always happens when you're making a video. Something goes wrong. Anyway, if I go to codes, there's no codes. That would have flung up that P0171 almost within the space of a couple of minutes. So I'm going to go back into data, and we shall see what our fuel trim is reading again. So sometimes this scanner just tends to freeze up on you. Yeah, short-term and long-term fuel trim are both reading, both around about 0. If I rev it, rev the engine up, look at that, both on 0. And like I say, if they go into the minus figures, either one of them, don't worry too much. But if they were both sitting around about 30 or in the 20s, then you've got a problem. That will fling the code up into the ECU, and eventually the engine management light will come on. Now this car, since we've changed that evap solenoid, this car has done a good 50-60 miles and it's been absolutely perfect. It drives fine. Everything on the data side on this scanner, for your lambda sensors, the readings, and for these fuel trim readings, are reading as they should be. So I think I was very lucky actually, because I'll just switch it off. I mean, listen to that run. The engine doesn't shake at all. It is running perfectly still. In actual fact, you drive it, it drives absolutely fine. I'll just switch that off. But yeah, that code relates to, obviously you could have an air leak. That would probably be the biggest problem. The thing that could be the first thing you'd want to look for is an air leak. Obviously something like the dipstick out, or filler cap off, a leak on your manifold, I don't know, a vacuum pipe off or something like that. I've heard that the flaps that are inside your manifold, there's like swirl flaps, they can be a problem, but they sound okay. So I wasn't really sort of like going to go down the whole changing the manifold route. Your airflow meter could cause this problem. The trouble is, when you're dealing with something like this, where it could be that airflow meter, it could be your lambda sensors, it obviously was your evap solenoid, it could be your injectors, it could, you know, there are so many different things it could be. It's how much money are you prepared to spend to try and find the answer. But in my case, it was this evap valve. That's the only thing I replaced, and as soon as I replaced this valve, bang, everything was perfect and back to normal again. And I'll just go over that again. I would only have to start this engine up and have it running, ticking over for 2 minutes, and that code P0171 would pop up in the engine ECU every single time without fail. And as soon as I fitted that evap valve, the code did not come back, and we've done like 50 odd miles in it now. No codes, the fuel trims are perfect, so I'm kind of like, yeah, I reckon I got lucky there. I mean, that's not something I'd normally go for. You could go around changing things forever and a day and get nowhere on this kind of bloody code. So yeah, so if anyone else has that problem and there is nothing bloody obvious, I mean, obviously if the engine's running like a piece of shit, then you want to look elsewhere. But I mean, if your engine's running perfectly fine like this one, and you don't see any reason why that code should be flung up, then something like that, which you wouldn't normally suspect, well, what can I say? But anyway, it's fixed and I'm happy. So that's it. Hope this helps. See you in the next one. Adios.